academia, industry, and government to engage and inform students, as well as the public, on issues at the interface of science, policy, and society. And we have been doing this for the last 10 years by hosting a variety of events, such as our SBE Cafe series, where we have informal discussions on current policy issues with graduate students and ECRs, and also public forums like the one today on hot topics that the society is concerned about. We also host training workshops for students and ECRs on engaging with science and policy, as well as consultations like the Student Perspectives on STEM Education in Canada and the Pan-Canadian Survey on Graduate and Postgraduate Fellowships. We publish reports after each of our events summarizing key takeaways and policy recommendations, and you can find these on our website. So a little housekeeping before we begin the event. So during today's event, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can click on the Q&A box to enter your questions. And we have also enabled the upvote feature. So if you find questions similar to the ones you wish to ask, you can simply vote for that question, and the questions with the most vote will appear higher in the list. We also have a live interpretation feature. So if you click on the interpretation icon, you'll be able to select your preferred language. We have live interpreters for English as well as French. And unfortunately, the service won't be accessible for those viewing via our live stream link. The live streaming for this event is on our Science and Policy Exchange YouTube channel. And if you're here with us today and live tweeting, don't forget to tag us at DSP_SPE and to use the hashtag SPE Public Forum. So now to the event. Our moderator for this evening is Alexandra Jallet. She is a PhD researcher at McGill University in the Department of Chemistry. She obtained her BSc from Université de Montréal. Alexandra is also involved in science communication as the director of Pint of Science Canada, for which she was recognized with the McGill Principal Prize for Public Engagement, Special Recognition for Public Outreach. She is also the co-founder of ConSciCon Can. So with that, I'll be handing it over to Alexandra.
Awesome, thank you, Momo. Well, welcome everyone to, I guess, my living room. I don't know what to welcome you today. So as Momo said, I'm a PhD student, but in chemistry. So when the pandemic started, I had no clue what that meant or what was happening. I could barely tell what a virus was compared to bacteria. Like, I'm not this kind of chemist, like I'm the material chemist. I don't know bio stuff. So, but I'm a science communicator. I love science. You can see it's all around me. That's my life. And I was curious to know what was going to happen, right? What was happening. And all my friends or my family turned out to me as like, oh, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, what? Like, no. So I'm as lost as maybe a lot of you today, because I have no idea what earth and bio stuff mean. Like, I've learned a lot over the last year, but I still have a lot to do. But as scientists, people turn out to us because they think that we are awesome and we know everything. I wish they were right. This is really not happening. I've read a lot over the last year of bio stuff that I wish I've never had to read, but here we are. So I hope that today, people that actually know those bio stuff are gonna give us some tips on how to approach misinformation and how to communicate about it so we can help others and get out of this mess. So to give you a bit more background about how today's gonna happen, so we're gonna have 3 short presentations by our 3 amazing panelists, and then a long Q&A session. So please drop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom right there. If you're on Zoom with us, if you're on YouTube, we're also gonna moderate the chat over there. So please ask questions. You can ask them during the presentations, like you don't have to wait. We're gonna keep them, we're gonna sort them, and we're gonna answer as much as possible, as many as possible after the 3 talks. So that's all for the like schedule of today, let's say. And I encourage you to use the emoji or like the chat to like encourage and cheer for panelists who are taking time off of their very busy schedule to be with us today. I was so honored to be like moderating this panel because I've been looking out for them so much. Like I'm a groupie right there. Like, let's say it. So okay, we're gonna start with the first presentation. So okay, it's time for like a tongue twister. So be ready for that. So Olivier Bernard is a science communicator expert on specialized in fighting health misinformation. And actually, you may know him under his comic artist name. I guess this is all we say that, Le Pharmacien. So that's a play on word with pharmacien and pharmacist, which relates to Olivier's academic background on his actual job. So in English, he goes by the pharmacist, I believe. So Olivier has a B.Pharm on an MSc in pharmacogenetics and currently works at the pharmacist on many other things, including a TV show. Like, he's awesome and he's everywhere. So I hope I got all the pharmacist, fils, chien right, French and English. Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad. So I'll let Olivier share his slides. And I'm very excited to see what he has to say for us today.
Oh, so I'm the first speaker after all.
Oh, you are not supposed to be?
No, that's perfectly okay.
Surprise! I'm sorry.
All right. So let's go. Okay, so
I was right. Everything is going according to plan. Told you.
That's perfect, actually. Hi everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. One who's not so glad to be here today is my dog. He's somewhere in there, back there. He's not happy when I do these kind of things. So if he barks at some point, I'm sorry about that. He misses me when I do these kind of things. But as for myself, I'm extremely happy to be with you guys today. I have a very, very short presentation, very short slide deck, which pretty much summarizes what I wanted to talk about today. And I've called it Nothing is Going According to Plan, which sums up everything that's going on right now with the pandemic. So what do we have to deal with? Well, we have to deal with these tons of products that say they can boost your immune system. We have to deal with experts that go rogue and say that, confining oneself is not useful, it's useless, that masks are no good. More recently, we've had some vaccine misinformation. And I don't know if you guys saw that. It's a couple of videos that say that there's some fetal cells, aborted fetus cells in some of the vaccines. And I mean, for someone who has some kind of background in biology or pharmacology, that does not make a lot of sense. But it's actually pretty hard to debunk that kind of things. I don't know if you've heard about that before. It's called Brandolini's law, also known as the bullshit asymmetry principle. I'm sorry about the word, but I didn't decide it. It's really how it's called. And it means that the amount of energy needed to refute misinformation is an order of magnitude larger than to produce it. What that means is it's really, really, really hard to explain to people, okay, what's a stem cell? How is it used in research? How are vaccines made and all that? That's really hard. But putting a video like that just says there's some fetal cells in the vaccines and everyone's scared, that's pretty easy. And there's no way we can fight against that. There's just no way we can do it. And more recently, we've been dealing with some riots. I don't know about you guys, depending on where you are in Canada, but here in Montreal, it's been pretty bad. Told you. So there's people just rioting about vaccines, masks, the independence of Quebec also for some reason. I don't know. They just converge, all of them. So when you look at all of this, it's pretty easy to say, well, people are naive, or worse, you can say people are dumb. That would be the easy answer, right? Well, it's not that simple. In terms of scientific communication, historically, we've operated using something that we could call the knowledge deficit model. So what is it? It's basically the idea that if someone does not have some scientific knowledge, then just give him more knowledge, so he'll know some things, and then that person will do things differently. Now that sounds good, but that doesn't work, or at least it doesn't work all the time. Just to give you an example, in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, more education, so that includes scientific education, leads to more pseudo-scientific beliefs. So like you see that in everything that's related to food, nutrition, all these pseudo therapies, and also vaccines. There's a subgroup of people who are against vaccines that are highly educated. So you could expect that they would believe in vaccines, but they don't. So it's kind of counterintuitive, if you will. One of the reasons that we can explain that is something called motivated reasoning, which is a phenomenon that all human beings experience, and is the fact that we don't really look for the right or the accurate answers. We usually look for the answers that will comfort ourselves in the beliefs that we have already. So that's what we do when we do searches online and look for information. So you can pile on information, knowledge on these people. It's not going to make much difference. Sometimes the awareness of the science doesn't make any difference. Take climate change. Climate change has pretty much nothing to do with being aware of the consensus or not. The main determinant of whether or not you believe about climate change is political affiliation. That's the main thing that will influence whether or not you're into the consensus or not. So again, how can you expect to bring up more knowledge? That's not going to make any difference. We're in an era of mistrust right now. Some say we've always been, but I think it's obvious, at least. And a lot of people will say things like, I don't trust the government nowadays. I don't trust big business and all that. And again, the first thing we're tempted to do or say is, well, these people, they're lost or they're crazy or I don't know. But really, who can blame them? I mean, look at all the scandals that we've had in terms of science and health in the last few decades. Everything about tobacco, oil, and even in the pharmaceutical industry, in the food industry. So how can we blame people to be mistrustful? That makes no sense. I mean, of course they're mistrustful. I mean, I think it's even a good thing in a way. So we don't want to to blame people for having some mistrust at the same time. And lastly, the thing is that most scientific debates are not even rational. So again, this idea of bringing more knowledge, they're really emotional. Like, just go online and read about your own field of expertise, wherever it's medicine or something else. It's pure emotion. You'll see, like, I don't know, like kids turning into zombies and like side effects, death. This doctor was this huge pile of money in his pockets. I never had that, to be honest. Like, I never walked around with some money like that. Never happened. Even this baby that's impaled on a syringe. I mean, I've never done that. I've never ever done that in my practice as a pharmacist. Mostly because I've never found a syringe that was big enough. But still, I mean, it's really all about emotions and not really facts, unfortunately. And I think it's pretty uncomfortable for us in the scientific or medical field to acknowledge that, because we're comfortable with facts, but not really with emotions. So it's kind of a tough deal. So what can we do? Obviously, I'm not going to be exhaustive here, but this is really to launch a conversation afterwards. Things we can do as a society first, okay? There's a number of things we can do. First thing is we need to regulate social networks, and I think it's one of our biggest mistakes. We've let social networks regulate themselves. They've set their own editorial guidelines, and they've even created algorithms that push misinformation on intent. It's part of their business model. So we should have regulated them, 10 years ago, but we didn't. So we should do it now, obviously, because that's not working for sure. We need to study and track misinformation. That's really a field of research where there's not a lot of research. Look for it. There's not a lot of it. So we need to see how it propagates online and elsewhere. We need to do research on effective communication strategies. I've shared some things with you a few minutes ago. We don't know a lot again. So what kind of communication strategies work better in terms of, the public, in terms of, campaigns, all that. And we need to teach critical thinking skills to children as young as possible. Some experts even say we should do it as like as young as four of age, I think. So again, critical thinking is not the same as science. You can have 2 PhDs in science and not have a lot of critical thinking. I'm sorry, but that's really how it is. So I think that one of the big reasons why we're in this trouble right now is that we haven't put critical thinking was never a priority. It's not part of the curriculum right now in school. So I think we should think about that very strongly. And finally, things we should as individuals do. First, I think we need to try new communication approaches. So as science communicators, as healthcare professionals, as policymakers, whatever, I think that this top-down approach where we say, we're the experts and we're going to tell you how it is, and here's some knowledge, and get that into your naive head or whatever, that doesn't work. People need to be listened to. They need to be offered empathy, to be normalized. We need also to grant them something. Again, if they're mistrustful, there's a reason for that, and we need to acknowledge that. And then maybe we can broaden their perspective. We need to educate ourselves about misinformation and pseudoscience. This is not the same as science. Again, I mean, misinformation is something, it requires a specific set of skills. It's like a new field of expertise, even, I would say. So again, we need to train ourselves on how to distinguish between what's science and pseudoscience. We don't do that in college, by the way. And finally, I think that as scientists or whatever what you do, we need to build relationships and gain the trust of both journalists and politicians. That's actually one of the things I think it's one of the solutions I look forward to myself, is if we can build these great relationships with these people who are in direct contact with the people. I think this bridge we can create will help a lot in what's to come. That's it.
Awesome.
That went fast. Thanks so much. And I look forward to discussing that with you later.
Thank you so much, Olivier. That was very great. And what you just said about the teaching kids even critical thinking, it makes me think of there is a science literacy course developed at University of Alberta. It's like a few months old. It's in the chat right now. So it's a free course, and you can just take a few lessons, not all of it. There is no stress about it. And I think it's a great way of approaching it for adults, and then maybe we can apply that to kids later. But at least for us, because when I've heard about it, I'm like, how do we even learn that? I feel like I've learned that my whole life. It took me 25 years to get it, right? How do we learn and teach that? So, and also I've heard that kids in Quebec, there is a pilot program that they're actually teaching kids that in Quebec right now for secondary. I don't remember how old they are. They show them how to make a deep fake video and kind of thing. So it's in the process, let's say. And I think NSERC is launching a brand new program about that as well, in the few weeks. So it's a big topic. So when you mentioned that, I was like, I know. And also the protests in Montreal, I can tell you, they are right under my apartment every weekend. And yes, Quebec independency, why? But yeah. Anyway, so thank you for that. Can we have a round of applause, virtual for Olivier? I don't know if we can. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll let Fatima share her slides now, and I'll introduce her shortly for our second presentation. So Fatima has a bachelor in biology and a master's in human genetics, and works for the Research Institute of the McGill University Health Center as a geneticist, specializing in child health. So she does know a lot about the genetic stuff, all the things that I have no clue what that meant a few months ago. She knows that. And she does tremendous and amazing science communication work. I met her thanks to Twitter, actually, a few months ago. I don't know, it's been a year, actually. We have to say a year now. It's 2021 already. So I want to acknowledge how much time, empathy, resources she puts out there. The funniest cursing words that I've ever heard. It's worth it, honestly. So she's really trying to reach out to as many people as she can, with different backgrounds, different approaches, in different languages. I think she can do science in more languages than I can say hello, how are you? She's impressive on so many levels. And she's also the communication and research lead for COVID-19 Resources Canada, and a member of the steering committee for ScienceUpFirst initiative. So those two strong initiatives are really trying to leverage all the knowledge that we have in Canada to beat this damn pandemic, and they're doing amazing work. So if you don't follow them, I think they're on every single platform you can think of. go have a look, because they really put like an amazing team together, and they're really trying to make a difference and fighting all the stupidity around there. So I don't know if she does it all. I don't sleep already. I don't know if she does that. Then she also walks in the lab doing PCR and whatever. I just stand here and be like, wow, she's impressive. So I won't take much more of your time. And I'll let Fatima give our presentation now. And thank you for the questions in the chat, also in the Q&A. Keep them coming, please. And we'll answer them after the third one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. One of the best intros I've ever had, ever. It's awesome. I'm really, really delighted and happy to be, actually I'm at the Glen, for those of you who are in Montreal. I'm at work at the hospital, but to be with you virtually. This is a very, very important topic. And it's true, I probably sleep 4 hours a night. I'm very busy, but when I was asked to do this, I was very happy and delighted to do it, especially because I realized I'm going to be as part of a panel with very, very awesome people. Olivier, that was a great presentation. You sort of set it up really nicely for me. You brought up very good points and topics that I'm going to pick up and continue. So one of the very important, everything you mentioned was very important, but a couple of threads that I want to pick up on are the issue of tying the tackling of misinformation with health literacy, and the fact that we need to start empowering people, giving them the ability to use rational thinking and logical reasoning at early on. If you empower people with those skills, and these are skills that anybody can hone. We hone them as scientists by going through processes, iterations of learning, and it has nothing to do with like brain capacity or anything like that. Anybody can learn to do them, and we should be focusing on it. So, and as Olivier mentioned, it's not just a matter of giving people more knowledge, because we do indeed see there's a lot of research, there's a lot of data that shows health literacy and how you approach and accept misinformation doesn't really correlate with your level of education. So I'm going to be talking about misinformation from a health literacy perspective. And to begin with, let's just take a look at and see what is health literacy. So health literacy, as it's defined by UNESCO and WHO, is basically the degree with which people are able to access, understand, appraise, and communicate health information in order to promote and maintain their own well-being. And this is a holistic well-being. Health literacy has a lot of different stakeholders associated with it. The person, the individual being one, the healthcare providers being a very, very important one, your community, your society, the public health institutions, the health system, the hospitals, the clinics that you go to, and of course, the education system. So those are all the stakeholders, that your little bubbles that you interact with throughout the course of your life that either enable your health literacy or hinder your health literacy. And the latest report by the Canadian Public Health Association, CPHA for short, shows that unfortunately, awareness of health literacy and the challenges that individuals might face in having adequate health literacy is actually quite low amongst policymakers and healthcare providers, healthcare practitioners. Another very important point that Olivier mentioned, we are not all of us have, and by us, I mean the scientists, the doctors, the nurses, the people who are involved in the health industry. We don't all come fully aware of the emotional aspects of the dialogue. We don't all come fully equipped with the communication needs. We all do science. A lot of us do great science, but not all of us have the empathy and the skills to communicate it well to the public. So a little bit of statistic to share with you. This is quite alarming for me to find out, so I thought I should share with you. About 60% of adult Canadians are unable to obtain, understand, and act on health information. That's a huge number. And again, just to go back to the point I raised in terms of correlation, whether there's a correlation with your education level or not, the literacy level, which is like your reading level, your prose level, prose literacy is called, amongst Canadian, it's somewhere around 40 to 48%. So you see there is a divide. The gap in health literacy is a lot bigger than it is in just other types of the regular kind of literacy, sorry, I don't know what to call it, that is measured. And as you can see in the graph right here, there's quite a bit of divergence and variety across regions, and that has a lot to do with the types of resources that are available, the demographic of each provinces and territories. For instance, in remote regions like Nunavut, there is digital inequity. So there is limited access to internet and digital services that can have a negative impact on health literacy. And another alarming statistic is that on average, health literacy for a person who's an immigrant is 20% lower than a non-immigrant person in Canada. And again, that has nothing to do with their education level. This is an artifact of systemic barriers such as language, culture, discrimination that individuals who have a different immigration status face compared to the rest of population. So keeping those in mind, I hope that you're starting to see that health literacy, our ability to access and comprehend and act on health information it's an important part of us being able to identify what is misinformation, what is accurate. So I sort of brought this up, the different components of health information are access, whether you're able to comprehend, whether you're able to evaluate, and whether you're able to communicate it properly. Right now, so the little pointy fingers that you see, I put around components that are the biggest challenge. Access right now is not as much of a challenge because of social media, because of the digital age, because everything is at your fingertip. Everybody has a mini computer in their back pocket walking around, and you can Google anything and access anything. So access is not as much of an issue for the most part. There are parts of the country where they do have digital access issues, like certain provinces and territories. But for the most part, the challenge is ability to evaluate, to communicate, to comprehend health information. And again, going back to the issue of overflow of information, it was only a few days after the pandemic was declared that the WHO actually declared an infodemic to go along with it. And we see it as a scientific community with the amount of preprints and scientific literature that is being produced on an hourly basis. I kid you not, I DM myself on Twitter the articles that I want to read, that I need to read. I have so many on a given day or hour. I have a gazillion tabs open, and they're all literature that I need to read, to sift through in order to distill it down and convey it in an accessible way to the public. And I cannot keep up. Every time I finish reading a paper, there's another one that comes out that either makes the results of the previous one obsolete, or it's anyway. So it's a lot to deal with for me as an expert, as a scientist. I can't even imagine how it must feel for the average public. And again, I thought this picture would capture it really nicely. Back in the day, this is, in the I think in the 1800s. People would stand around and read newspaper, but that was it. Your news was coming to you, the source of information was coming to you at discrete points during the day or during your week. It wasn't the 24-hour news cycle. It wasn't the 24-hour pundits and experts on media basically feeding your information. As opposed to, down here, you see a group of people waiting for metro, and they're all on their digital devices. So again, the issue of access is one thing. We are all overflown by information. The challenges are in other areas. So a lot of groups, a lot of people in this field have done research. We sort of have a good idea as to how to tackle misinformation using health literacy approaches, and it all comes down to all those stakeholders that I mentioned, the very diverse stakeholders that are part of health literacy, working together. It requires instituting policies and collaborative, society-wide collective action. One of the most important things we try to do in tackling misinformation is to try to induce skepticism towards the agents of disinformation or misinformation. Olivia briefly mentioned this as well. It ties a little bit on the issue of mistrust, that people have mistrust towards the pharma, the big pharma, the scientists, the politicians. It's good to every now and again, when you're engaging with people, to remind them that, well, do you know what is the actual intent of people or agents that are putting this disinformation out? A lot of we actually have data that shows a lot of it are by bad faith foreign actors, that a lot of misinformation, most of misinformation can be distilled down to about 10 to 12 known sources. And a good portion of that comes from overseas, from outside the country. So it's good to implement that as part of your strategy. And then another very important approach is finding credible sources of information easy. So for instance, what Olivier does, he creates sort of like comic cartoons. What we are doing with COVID-19 Resources Canada, with ScienceUpFirst, we are creating posts that are very bite-sized information. You make it easy for people to access accurate information. You cultivate science literacy and understanding the process of science. One of my biggest regrets throughout this pandemic has been not communicating the process of science to people. We've greatly failed at walking people empathetically without discrediting their anxieties and their mistrust, helping them understand that uncertainty is an inherent part of science. That's why we do science. If everything was certain, then that's it, boom, we've found everything, we have the answer to everything, we got to close shop and move on. It's the whole enterprise is based on uncertainty, and it's iterative. So I wish we had done a better job of making people appreciate the process of science, but it's not a lost cause. I think that should definitely be on the agenda. Combating conspiracy theories by partnering with influencers, that works. People like to hear information being communicated to them by people they respect and they trust and look up to. That's why Goop works. It's based on that model. That's why a lot of celebrities are involved with selling pseudoscientific products. It works. It generates money. Mobilize the public health majority to counter online information, and that comes down to basically getting all the grassroots initiatives. Right now, there are a lot of grassroots initiatives across the country that are tackling misinformation in their own little way. It would be very good to find a forum sort of like this to bring all of them together to learn from each other's experiences and have more of a targeted national strategy to help out. An important part of that will become inclusion. We are a very diverse nation. You walk down the street, downtown Montreal, or downtown Toronto, you're bound to hear a lot of different languages being spoken, but this diversity is not always included in decision-making and policy-making. Making sure that people from diverse backgrounds are included in communication, in creating communication means, that becomes very important. And as anybody who's involved with science communication can tell you, debunking misinformation works, but it really works when you align culture, context, and identity of people. For instance, it's a lot easier for me to debunk something that somebody in a Muslim community has heard, because I come from that culture and that I share that context and that identity with them. It will be a lot easier for me to reason with them and discuss whatever the misinformation is, because they know that we share the same values as opposed to an outsider. And lastly, as Olivier mentioned, we need to proactively monitor, flag, and downrank and remove basically social media posts that promote misinformation. This is extremely important. It's just starting to happen, but there's still a lot of work to do on that regard. So very briefly, I'll give you an example of what we've done with ScienceUpFirst. We decided with ScienceUpFirst is basically a pan-Canadian initiative. We have a coalition of very diverse clinicians, scientists, some of whom you see on your TVs, debunking misinformation, giving you health information. We create content that is exclusive for social media. And the reason we decided to exclusively target social media was because in a recent survey by WHO, but a lot of people, as you can see the results of the survey here, a lot of people tend to share, especially 18 to 40 years of age, they tend to share information, get the source of information in the news online through social media. And sharing of any video content, anything that has images, is very popular. It's a fast and easy and catchy way of sharing information. So that's why we decided to tackle, do an on a social media sort of campaign. We create posts, as you can see here, that tackle common questions, common misinformations that are floating around. And we are using a crowdsourcing model. We have encouraged the members of public. We have over 12,000 followers on our various social media platforms. On Twitter alone, I think we have over 12,000. And we ask people to sign up to our website and amplify. All these posts that we make are downloadable so that they can share it with their family members, with their friends, within their circles, and help basically debunk misinformation. And a little bit of metric in terms of the impact that we've had. Our posts have been seen by over 90 million people from across the globe, across various social media platforms. We've reached over 49, close to 50 million people, and generated close to 80,000 different types of engagement using our posts. So it's debunking works. It has an impact. It just it takes a lot of effort. It requires concerted effort and energy, but it totally works. And with that, I think I went over my time, but I'll stop. Thank you.
That was super critical information to give. And well, I think the order that I've picked randomly today is actually pretty good. And I was also impressed when I read about that most of the misinformation, is coming from only 12 sources. I'm like, those people have so much time to annoy us. I mean, this is impressive. And yeah, like, so we are a bit behind schedule, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think that the process of how science is made, like what researchers do, is a big issue, like in every single field. And for health information, it's people can die, but like it brings it to like a brand new level, and I think this is why it's important. Like, what is a clinical trial? No, I feel like no one knew that until December, and when the Pfizer came up first, we were all like what? But I feel like we should have known like 6 months ago, 1 year ago, like when we were kids, what is a clinical trial? And now we have people comparing efficiencies, for example, of different vaccines, but we can't. Like 6 months apart, like it cannot be done. Like those numbers are not set in stone. And I think because we learn science as being a theory in a book that we read from like a French old guy, from like the 19th or whatever, and we think that science is in a book, and it's there, and it's, like stuck there, and like, science evolves, and I think that this is a big issue for every science. And when we communicate about science, this is the center point of so many issues that arise from that. So I think that's a very good point to bring. Thank you so much for all the questions in the Q&A. I encourage you to upvote as well, because we have so many. So if you can go through it and upvote some of them, that'd be lovely. Well, virtual applaud for Fatima, and thank you so much. That was lovely. And I want to welcome Vera, our third panelist, to the stage. So Vera is a PhD candidate at the School of Information Studies at McGill, exploring the role of collaboration in keeping up to date with the latest information. Vera is also a researcher embedded information specialist, and a research coordinator with the Quebec Sport Support Unit at the Department of Family Medicine from McGill as well. There she leads health information and research literacy initiatives and a collaborative information monitoring system. Vera is passionate about information literacy, the value of information, collaboration, community, patient engagement, and citizen science. Also, when do you sleep? And I was very intrigued to learn that she also has a master's of library and information science in knowledge management and a bachelor in English. So I feel like it shows nicely, and it highlights very nicely that science communication is not only about a guy in a lab coat with a pipette in their hands. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Vera to share our slides. And once again, if you have questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A or in the chat if you're on YouTube, and we'll get started with the question right after that. So thanks, Vera, for being with us today. And whenever you're ready, we can get started.
Perfect, super. I don't have any slides, so it will just be me. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be a part of this panel, and also thank you all for attending and being a part of this conversation, especially since I missed the preparatory meeting. I was really pleased in hearing what Olivier and Fatima had to say, because I think my talk fits and complements it really well. So as Alexandra said, I'm an information specialist, and that all that means is that I'm trained as a librarian. But because most information is not in libraries anymore, or even in books, this is the new term, and especially for people like myself who I've never worked in a library. So instead, I've been doing research with the team at the Department of Family Medicine at McGill for the past 13 years, and we've been looking at health information. What we're specifically interested in is really what happens when people use information, and how do they benefit or not from that use. And our work is really grounded in the belief that trustworthy information is key to decision-making and active engagement as patients and as citizens. So needless to say, because of all this, my angle at confronting misinformation is very much aligned with my professional and personal values as a librarian. It's an education, and really teaching the public how to better search, critically evaluate, and use the health information they find. And when I say use, of course, it involves using it for your own health, but also sharing it with others. So this is the skill set that is referred to as health literacy, as Fatima showed us. And I strongly believe that as citizens, we need to be better prepared to think critically about health information and to discern with more confidence trustworthy information from misinformation. This pandemic has touched us all, regardless of whether we got sick or not. As I joke that I live in fear of getting a call from my kids' schools about class closures, but it has also highlighted just how the overwhelming overload and complexity of health information, and also how much we as a society are not equipped to navigate this informational landscape, that there's a lot of information coming from different sources, from scientific community, government agencies, health organizations, traditional news sources, and also anyone and everyone on social media platforms. This information is changing quickly. It's sometimes hard to understand, sometimes contradictory or inaccurate, or just potentially harmful. And health literacy can be a part of the solution. Just to add to what Fatima was saying, that we know people with higher health literacy are better at engaging in and managing their health. Reversely, low health literacy is linked to misusing or overusing health services, such as emergency visits or hospitalizations. And lower health literacy is also more prevalent among vulnerable populations, such as the elderly, immigrant populations, minority groups, and low income populations, which are also the same groups that have been impacted by the pandemic the hardest. So our research team has been looking at people's experience with online health information, but we've always looked at how it impacts individuals. So how trustworthy information can help individuals manage their own health or the health of a family member or a friend. But the pandemic, I think, really has demonstrated that health literacy is critical to both personal and public health, that this virus, or like the virus, misinformation seems to be airborne these days. And just like wearing a mask, we need to filter what goes in, or the information we consume, and what goes out, the information that we share. And to do so, our team actually developed two websites that the links were shared in the chat. One is called Online Health Information Aid, and another one is called Understanding Research. Both websites were actually co-developed with users, and they're available in English and French, and hopefully without too much jargon. And it fits really nicely with what was said before, that I think Online Health Information Aid really tries to teach critical thinking skills and how we can better search, critically evaluate, and use health information. You know, so for example, we explain what's the difference between a web browser or a search engine, or how Google works. And in thinking critically about information, we often say to use the 5 W's like a journalist, and ask questions of who, what, where, when, and why. Where research, the Understanding Research website, which is really a research literacy or science literacy website, is really about trying to explain the process of science and of health research. You know, so we explain what are research ethics, what's epidemiology, and this resource, this website actually came from patient partners that work with us. And I'm not sure, I think it was Fatima who said, in terms of like using the same language, and it was a great story where a patient partner came and said, yes, I've been involved in participatory projects, but when we sit around the same table, we do not speak the same language. So that's really how this website was born, is like, well, okay, let's define these terms and explain the processes so we could speak the same language. And this is just to say that this initiative was made possible by the Quebec Sport Support Unit, which is part of a larger pan-Canadian strategy for patient-oriented research. So to finish up, and actually I feel it will touch upon several things that were said before, I want to talk about the 3 elements that I find really key in promoting health literacy, and they are uncertainty, triangles, and red flags. So science represents an ongoing search for knowledge, and as a friend of mine likes to say, in French, she says, it's in the word, recherche. We search because we don't know yet. And it's important to normalize the fact that we don't know some things yet. And what also whatever we know today may be reversed or contradicted by new evidence tomorrow. Some questions will also stay unanswered, which is really essential for scientific discovery to go on. And I think maybe counterintuitive to some, but definitely not to librarians, I find it important to talk about the uncertainty and to be able to say, I don't know. As librarians joke that our most frequent reply is, I don't know, but I will look it up. And this is precisely the reflex that I hope people develop. Once people start looking for information, of course, we recommend to rely on trustworthy sources. And I think it's really important to go further than simply providing a list, but really explaining what makes a source trustworthy or not. And then we have to check several sources and see whether they agree with each other. And this year, actually, I organized, my daughter goes to an alternative school, so the parents are allowed and encouraged to become involved, and actually did an information literacy workshops that I was able to give to the entire school because everything is on Zoom. And that's exactly, we talked about science, we talked about the difference between facts and opinions about different sources. And I would show them the triangle with my hands and say, you have to look for 3 sources or triangulate. And finally, once information or misinformation is encountered, I hope that our work helps people to pause and question the information and potentially to raise red flags. This pause is important as time to digest, to reflect, and ideally to make a quick self-check about how accurate is this information? How do we feel about this? Is this information making me angry or scared? Should I share it? And this pause also goes hand in hand with this concept of a nudge that comes from a research team from the University of Regina, who observed that people actually want to share accurate information, but don't seem to think about accuracy at the moment of sharing. However, when they were nudged with a short pop-up questionnaire asking questions about accuracy before sharing, the quality of the information they shared improved. And this finding is important, I think, because especially Statistics Canada reported that nearly all Canadians saw at some point COVID-19 misinformation online. However, only 1 in 5 reported always checking the accuracy of the information. So even if people can't spot the misinformation, at the very least, I hope to help them stop and consider the information and to think about it critically. And this is what we try to do with our websites and our workshops, is to have red flags go up, and hopefully eventually people will also gain confidence in their critical ability. And to sum up, there are many important ways to protect ourselves and others from misinformation, such as removing or blocking it on social media platforms, fact-checking, policy, and effective science communication. I think we need them all, but we also know that we can't remove misinformation from social media fast enough, that the time it takes to detect and remove it is enough for someone to read and share it. We also know that misinformation circulates outside of social media too, and that's why I advocate for really equipping the public with health literacy and critical thinking skills, and I agree, as early as possible, and empowering them to detect misinformation instead of relying on someone else to say whom to trust. And finally, health information is really just one area, but one that affects all of us. And health literacy is only one type of information literacy. Information literacy and informed decision-making in general is essential to citizen engagement and democracy. And I'd like to leave you with a quote I really like from René Lévesque, who said, "Être informé, c'est être libre," or to be informed is to be free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veron. I think the quote to end was perfect. I love that. Then we have to choose, right? Because you can read about everything, but then how do you wait on all? So that's another question. So we're gonna get started with the Q&A because we have tons of questions. So I'm sorry in advance, we won't have time to go through all of them. So I'm gonna have to pick the most voted ones, and I'll I'll ask the panelists to answer if they feel like they are the best fit for this question, and try to answer as fast as we can, so we can go through as many questions as possible today. And I'll start with the first one over there. So if most scientific debates are emotional, is there a way we can employ de-escalation techniques to combat misinformation, to go from debates to conversations? I don't know who wants to take that one. Maybe Olivier, you're the best suited for that, because I remember from your talk 3 years ago, that's what you spoke about a lot, but I don't know if you want to take that one.
Well, I'm not sure if that's de-escalation techniques. I'm not familiar with the vocabulary, but there's this technique that I teach to healthcare professionals, which is pretty much what I said earlier. These 4 steps about asking more questions than saying things. So then you kind of try to find what's the real concern of the person, because usually when there's kind of this false belief, you tend to go with, oh, there's this clinical trial that says this. That doesn't work. Just find the real concern, give some empathy, like you need to say it, you need to verbalize it, like, oh, it's normal that you feel that way. I understand your concern. If I was in your place, I would feel the same, that kind of things. Grant them something like, in what you said, there's something that you said that's completely accurate, and that's pretty interesting, and it's cool that you look into this and all. And then once you've done that, I think you've de-escalated the thing, and then maybe the person will be more responsive to what you're about to tell them. And now I say that like if someone is in front of you, but the thing is, like, as a science communicator, I've found that you can do the same in writing. You can take the same approach.
On basically not saying if you're stupid, doing the opposite of that, that's already a good start, pretty much. It's hard to say what to do, but what to not do is to say you're stupid, go read more, whatever. That's a bad start.
Or just contradict the person, and that doesn't work.
Exactly. I have a question right there, though. I know that he wrote it twice in French and English, but I'm going to have to read the English one for now, I guess. So maybe I'm going to read the French one and we can have the translation. So I'll try that one. Avez-vous observé une différence entre les franco-québécois et les anglo-québécois face à leur relation avec la COVID, les infos partagées et leur niveau d'inquiétude face à cela? Et si oui, quelles sont selon vous vos hypothèses expliquant cela? I don't know if anybody wants to take that one, if you all got it as well.
I can give you anecdotal data based on my interactions and my own outreach. I am a polyglot. I speak 5 languages, and most of the outreach I do are with allophones. My French it's functional. It's hard for me to communicate science in French, so I don't engage as much with francophones, but the engagements that I have had with those who identify as francophones, I would say that the difference isn't really that great. What I've noticed is the type of misinformation is a little different. Again, this is anecdotal data, it makes sense based on what is your in-group, what group you identify with, what your social networks are, and we all tend to live in echo chambers. The echo chambers that an Arabic-speaking person is living in and getting information from is not necessarily, might have some common elements, but might not necessarily be the same as the one that a francophone is living in. That's my impression.
I feel like it could also be more like a location question more than a language. So like Montreal gonna have a trend that francophones in BC are gonna have another one, and also like English speakers in Montreal are drawn into the Quebec drama, if I want to speak this way. Like, I mean, there is a location maybe influence more than the language itself. This is what I noticed on social media, because I follow a bunch of people from all over, and I think this is a trend that I see. But once again, it's anecdotes only. Thank you for that. So next one that I have right there. How can we better communicate the uncertainty of science without undermining it? In the pandemic, mistrust of science seems to have increased, partially because of changing contradictory public health guidelines. which are based on the evolving understanding of the pandemic. We've introduced with research, but then it changes, and then how can we, say one day, oh, we should do that, and then, oh, actually, well, no, we have more data, and actually, maybe that would be better. So how do we explain that, and then we can tackle that? I see you nodding, Olivia. Are you ready to answer that one?
I've been trying to do this with my parents, and it's hard. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy. And again, I think that with adults it's so hard. That's the thing, like we're just so resistant to change, and telling adult people, science is uncertain, and what I'm going to tell you now is not going to be true next week. And we've seen that with the vaccines, the AstraZeneca stuff and all. So I mean, it's just tough, and that's why we need to just take people much earlier with that stuff. The scientific method. I was talking about critical thinking earlier. The best way to teach critical thinking is teaching the scientific method. How do scientists think? Well, anybody can think like that. So if we do that much earlier, it would be easier in the end. But I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. Even though I mean, we need to do it. We need to tell about the uncertainty, but we should do it earlier.
I agree. I could not agree more. So it's a two. Thank you. So I have a question in two parts. I'm going to ask the first one, and then I'm going to ask the second part. And it's a question specifically for Vera this time. Do you, as an information specialist, discern what is trustworthy information and what is not?
Well, and it's true. That's an excellent question, especially now. And I think, yeah, I guess there are different aspects. That there's the information source and the information itself, which isn't necessarily the same thing. Hold on, I'll go back. And I would say, and sometimes it's hard to say, there are some things that are black and white, and it's easier to cut and say this is right or this is wrong, but not everything is like that. And I think that's why also there isn't necessarily an easy answer to that question. I think based on my training and professional experience, I have a good sense. And I think, exactly, I often talk about red flags. I think some of it is just when to be more wary and more careful, and when you could be, or I guess more trusting, come with a more trusting mind. But yeah, and I think especially with the internet right now, yeah, kind of as my friends who are also librarians would say, there is no safe space on the internet, really. So it's very hard to say this is right or this is wrong in every case. Sometimes you can. Well, and I think it's the same person who wrote another comment, right? That even, well, and as was demonstrated before, researchers or people who are supposedly credible could still say misinformation. So even if someone says that I'm affiliated with such and such university or research group, it doesn't necessarily mean that the information that they're sharing by default is credible. So yeah, I guess my approach is to be critical all the time in face of everything.
Fatima, you want to ask?
Yeah, I want to add something that will tie in what Olivier said and what Vera said. We always follow in science, and I think most people are like that in everyday life too. When you want to buy something, you usually, especially these days, you read the reviews, you see in the reviews that you read, there might be a bunch of people that are disgruntled and they didn't like the product, but you don't make your decisions based on only the disgruntled. You see where the weight of evidence lies, right? If a product has 5,000 reviews and of the 5,000, 10 to 12% of them are meh, you make your decision based on where the majority lies. And that's how science functions. We do experiments multiple times because there are times that the result is funny, we can't explain it. Do you keep doing it? It's an iterative process. And that's how I think everybody functions in everyday life, but we haven't really connected the dots that the same approach can apply to evaluating evidence and misinformation.
I think another point that is important to raise here as well is that, you know, the labs, the unis, or workplaces, they're all closed. And then some people are starting to do research on COVID, not being from that field in the first place. And this is what people are doing, usually physics or mathematics or whatever, and they have PhDs and they are good at their jobs, which is math and physics. This is not the human body. This is not virus. This is not anything like that. And then because they can do math and they can code and they can analyze data, they started to do that with COVID data. That did not work very well. In some cases, it helps, and I think that multidisciplinary work is great, and we need collaborations. But maybe somebody with a PhD in math should not have, you know, such claims about how the virus is going to act or whatever. Using the math to say, oh, the data said that, but maybe not, you know, solving the pandemic with only a PhD in math. Maybe some people were a bit too, I don't know, pushing the limit of their knowledge a bit too much, trying to help and being genuinely nice about it. So the source may look credible because of a PhD, you know, like they're smart people, right? And this is where the gray line is hard to place and judge. We have so many questions. I really need to pick some on. So maybe one that is for me like very important. I don't know if any of the three of you would like to speak about like how to. So like finding misinformation, as Olivier said, it's, you know, you have to be like one level up, and it's so much and it comes from everywhere, and even yourself you don't know everything, and like, so sure. And like it brings a lot of mental health questions. So like, how do you protect yourself when you have to fight like the world of like, you know, Instagram at you? Like you cannot fight all of it. Do you have tips or advice or suggestions on how to protect ourselves as well? Because we cannot fight it all, right? That's not an easy one. I know it. I don't know if who wants to tackle that one.
My connection is weak and I lost the last bit of the question.
Oh, sorry. I was saying how to protect yourself when you're trying to debunk, explain to others, like how do you protect yourself? Or like when, like, do you have any mechanisms, tips for others, how to, you know, balance it out? Yes, this is not an easy one. I'm sorry.
I tell you what, it's been, and Vera and Olivia can speak for themselves as well. This has been one of the toughest times for me as a racialized woman. A lot of scientists, a lot of clinicians and healthcare providers, they get attacked, but women have it worse, and especially if you're a racialized woman, you have it even worse. You're like, really. So I try to, it's very hard, but I try to remind myself of why I'm doing this. I'll share a little bit of story about me. I came to Canada as a refugee, and English is my fourth language, French is my fifth language. I struggled when I was new in the country, and I was very young. I'd lost my family. I went through cancer diagnosis, and with very little English, I had to navigate the healthcare system. So having gone through that experience has really sensitized me to what are social determinants of health and why it's extremely important to show empathy when you're trying to communicate with people, even if they don't agree with you, even if their values are contrary to yours. So I try to always go back to that and remind myself as to why I'm doing this, and also try to remember that they are probably seeing it as an attack on their identity, as an attack to what they believe in. So try to stay away from anything that could aggravate that, and remain as objective as one can be, and be empathetic. That's the be it all and all of it. Like you need to show empathy, and hopefully that will help this de-escalate the situation and protect you and protect others.
Thank you.
Can I give 2 tips?
Go for it. Thank you.
The first one, choose your battles. You can't put, you know, the weight of the world on your shoulders. You can't fight every fight. You can have all the causes. I mean, pick one battle or 2 or 3, I mean, whatever you can take and just fight those, and the rest, just let them pass by. You can't do everything by yourself. And the second one is talk to a psychologist. I do. It helps tremendously. And please don't hesitate to do it when you feel not so good. We all need it sometimes.
That's very wise words. Thank you. So there are two questions, and I'm going to merge them, and I think it relates to how newspapers on social media platforms can be held accountable or sued, or like, is there a way, because like they are the one, you know, some people are creating misinformation somewhere, but then they are the one sharing it. It's not them, because they don't, you know, they don't click on share, but like it goes through them, like through those platforms, like so newspapers on social media. So is there a way that we can hold them accountable, filter what's going on there? Like, do you know anything about that? And what ideally also maybe could be done? Like, do you have ideas of like how to fix the system? I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but Facebook, I think, is doing something. Like Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, I mean, they're trying to do some stuff. Is that efficient? That's a brand other question. But like, at least I see stuff popping on my phone.
They're all doing something, of course. Yeah, but it just started like in the last couple of months. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, not so much, I think. But, you know, a lot of platforms started to say, well, we can't let misinformation spread like that. We have to stop this QAnon thing that makes no sense at all. But again, it goes into how social networks are built. And at some point, we'll have to recognize that, okay, if they say that they're going to do something, that's great, but we need laws. We can't let them do their stuff anymore. We need to think about that. We need experts to think about, okay, so we're into this mess. How can we improve social networks, and how can we impose some stuff on them? I don't like to do that, by the way. I'm all about free speech. But at this point, we need to find some solutions. And this is going to be in my opinion, it's going to be at the government level at this point.
Actually, like, it leads very like perfectly to another question. So at one point, like, if we are all about like, oh, critical thinking is important, we need different people and want like different voices. So then where is the limit? Because at one point you also need to have a debate, and like you need to welcome different opinions. And it's hard to say, you disagree with me, you should not have a voice. Like, you cannot do that. Like, and even within scientists, they are both never completely right or never completely wrong, because as we said earlier, we learn every day, and then it's okay to disagree. So how to say, oh, no, what you say is way too much, way too dangerous, way too wrong, and then what is wrong? Like, it's, you know, like it's so hard, because the right answer, we don't know what it is, and maybe it's like the right-est answer we have so far. So this is where I don't know where my question is going, even myself. So like, I'm sorry for that. But because like we read something, sometimes sort of preprint or something else, but like usually academics write papers, it goes through peer review. So it means like there are a bunch of like 3-4 other like experts of that field that validates the content, but it's based on their data. Like, or can we open, like, let space for different opinions, different perspectives without having too much and then dangerous stuff being shared? Yeah, I don't know what the question is, honestly. I'm sorry.
Hey, just a quick answer, and maybe that's going to help you, because I'm thinking about that all the time. But, you know, it's not about restricting opinions. Personally, I do. I try to look for opinions that are not aligned with those that I have. I do this deliberate act to make sure I don't fall into this echo chamber. So that's good. But when an algorithm just makes it so that people end up eventually on conspiracy theory videos and flat earth videos, that's not normal. So where do we draw the line? Where, I mean, at some point, there's some things we can say, okay, this really is a danger for society at this point. It's clear, it's clear as day. We can say that, you know, like at some point we knew QAnon was destructive. So we can put the limit there and say, okay, this is enough. That does not restrict personal opinion, free speech. It's no restriction. It's just making sure that these groups do not infiltrate, or at least they don't manipulate the tools such as social networks, because they have problems, they have bugs, or they can be manipulated. So that's where I think we should draw the line.
Thank you so much for that, for Olivier. I see we may have a bit more time for one more question. I'm trying to see out there. I mean, I saw also like if any of the three panelists, you have something that you'd like to discuss that nobody touched on, or you think it would be a point that should come across today, feel free. It's time. It's like now or never. So if you want to add something, or maybe we should do like closing remarks. If something like, okay, let's do that. If you should have like one thing to remember today, like one sentence that you want people to leave the room with today. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah, that's what I do. Who wants to take that first?
I can, because it's going to be so fast. There's one thing you should remember from this talk today. Just one thing. And that's the thing you want. And what I mean by that is the biggest mistake we do as communicators when we try to change things a little bit is we try everything at the same time. And I've experienced that many times. I watch or I watch a talk or I train in something. I'm like, I'm going to change everything, and that doesn't work. So if at some point one of us said something and you were like, that's interesting, I should do that. Just do this one thing. Start by one thing. And you shouldn't do more than that at this point. Then everything's gonna evolve from there.
Sounds good. I think that's wise advice again. So I'm sorry because we cannot. So I'm gonna give you the two others a bit time to think about it. So we cannot go through other questions. I'm sorry. We're gonna try to answer them as well, like typing the answers as well. So I'm sorry because we got so many. Like, so thank you for your interest, and that's part of the game of panels. We have the time that we have, and we answer as much as we can. So Vera, Fatima, any idea?
Well, I just want to say that we're sorry we went over time and there's not time to answer your questions, but you have our social media accounts, especially mine is there too. I like to engage with people if I have the expertise to answer your questions. Find us on social media and pose your questions. I will do my best to answer them, or maybe I can point you to somebody else who has already answered them. So yeah. And I want to second what Olivier said. It's you should take away from this whatever that really works within your context. For me, I always, again, this is my takeaway from the amazing talks I heard my peers give, is it all comes down to having an open mind when you engage with people, empathy.
Yeah, I think empathy is going to be the word of the day.
And just to add, I guess I would say literacy, whatever information literacy, digital literacy, health literacy, just all the skills that come with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the three of you. I've learned a lot, and I think that's a topic that we discuss often, but they're very important, and I've learned from different perspectives, from different people with different backgrounds. So thank you so much for sharing today. Yeah, and I think that SP is gonna have some closing remarks for you also. I want a last round of applause for all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you for people for the attendees for being here today as well, and for your questions. And I hope that we answered as much as we can. And maybe it's been helpful as well, hopefully. Thank you. So I'll let Momo.
Yeah, thank you to all the speakers for your incredible insight on a very timely topic. And a special shout out to Alex for being a fantastic moderator. This topic has the potential to go off on many tangents, but we hope with today's discussion, a few of your concerns have been clarified. And like me, you have learned new tools on how to combat misinformation. So before we leave, I would like to thank the entire Public Forum SPE team, especially Jonathan Caballero, our Public Forum lead, for organizing this panel. And as mentioned, we at SPE are going to be busy with writing reports. Let me just share my slide here. And so if you're keen on helping us out or want to learn more about our upcoming events, shoot us an email or follow us on social media. So thank you all for being a fantastic audience, and we hope to see you at another SB event. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Awesome job, Alex.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.